Hello, my name is David Howard. I'm a creative technologist based out of Atlanta, and today we're going to be going over mass exporting different kind of Illustrator assets and layers into TouchDesigner and playing around with those a little bit with some Replicator tricks. So with that, let's get started. So as always, we're going to work with a blank slate to start with. So to begin with, let's go ahead and create a constant for our resolution. So we can just go ahead and get a constant chop and name it resolution. We correctly name it resolution. And let's go ahead and label that as 100 for now. From there, in order for us to actually import Illustrator content, let's go ahead and get a folder dat, and we'll go ahead and set it to the correct folder. So in this case, I've got my TouchDesigner file in here in this base folder recording. So we're going to set SVG as our folder where the assets are going to live. In this case, I've already got something in it just to kind of make sure that things are working for testing purposes. But we're going to populate this more later on. And then finally, to get started, we're going to go ahead and get a base. And let's just go ahead and label this local SVG. This is where we're going to do most of our work in actually creating the SVG handling content from Illustrator before we kind of multiply it out with the Replicator. So let's go ahead and go into our local SVG base. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get our folder that we created from above. So not our folder dat, sorry, we need a select dat. And then we can just put in the dat field /folder1. And this is how basically, like, if you think of file structures and file hierarchies, the dot lets you select up one from your local SVG base into your projects, and then being able to select the folder one from our project one directory. Great. So let's go ahead and add in a constant chop, and we can go ahead and set that to 1. And then we can go ahead and select another select dat. So we can select the right file that we're actually looking for. Select rows by index, and we can just go ahead and get the start and end index to be the same. And then let's just go ahead and double check that this is actually the file that we're looking for and that it's a valid file at all. So what we can do is get a file in dat, and then we drag in the select, and then we want to select the correct cell. So 0,1, and we can see that we're getting code here, which SVGs is just a series of code and a series of shapes and vector data, or in this case, an embedded image. So great, we know that's valid. So now let's go into the palette, and we can just pull the SVG comp out of the palette. So from here, what we can do is the same thing as before, bring in the file, square bracket 0,1, and now we can see we have our SVG. Awesome. But let's go ahead and make sure that we have it as the right size to be consistent across everything else. So let's go ahead and bring in a fit top and a select chop. So we can go ahead and use the select chop to get our resolution. So /resolution. And let's go ahead and set this to fill and bring our resolution in the fit to match our resolution. Awesome. And from there, all we're missing is our alt top, and we have ourselves a successful way to bring in SVGs. So let's go on out and work on the Replicator side of it. Alrighty, so now that we know we can take in one SVG, let's work on taking in a lot of SVGs. So with that, we can bring in something called the Replicator comp, which if you haven't worked with this before, it's super powerful and super interesting to work with. I highly recommend looking at other tutorials as well to seeing all the things you can do with it. But it's basically a good way of taking like one base or one template and applying that physically in the canvas as many times as you want. So in this case, what we're going to do is with the Replicator comp, we're going to take our template dat table as folder 1. That's fine for our operator prefix to be labeled 9 or to be labeled item. And our main operator can be local SVG. As you can see, it immediately started populating it. A little bit in a position I don't want, so let's just bring that down a little bit for now. So now we can see we have item 1. And we're going to do one thing a little bit fancy with it to kind of help us down the road, future in this project. So let's go ahead and get a layout top, which we don't need to worry too much about for now. We just want to make it so that way all of our replicators content get auto connected to the layout top. And for that, there is a special line that you can type in. I'm just going to copy it in. So basically, whenever you replicate, you're going through this function to decide what it does. Most of the things it has are already commented out. But for every item that's being replicated, you can put a function to auto-connect it to another node in the canvas. So in this case, our output connector 0, our top connector, connects to the operator layout 1. Awesome. So what we can do now is our replicator. Let's recreate the replicator, and we can see it auto-connects. So that'll be super useful if you're running things like switches or layouts or things where you don't want to manually have to put that in, especially if you're working in a somewhat flexible and dynamic folder structure. And so from here, let's go into Illustrator and actually start creating all of our SVGs to export. So going into our Illustrator file, in this case, I've got it all pre-populated with just different assets that I want to use. You can also do this technique in Photoshop. It's pretty, you would just be Googling, instead of assets, you would just be Googling layers, or whatever specific selection you're going for. So in this case, what we have is each layer contains a single group. And the way Illustrator detects it is like each group is its own asset. And when each group is a whole bunch of vector paths from here. What I did was I just downloaded a bunch of company logos from social media brands you might have heard of. And just did the image trace option in Illustrator to turn them into vector. This works pretty well, although not perfectly, depending on the logo, depending on the complexity and the size. There's a lot of fiddling around to get it perfect, but we're not going to worry about that for now. So what we're going to do here is in all of our visible layers, holding Shift, we can select all of them. And we have a nice button called Collect for Export. And what that does is it brings us to, in my case, another tab, but it might open another window. And we want to collect a button, Generate Multiple Assets. So now we see we have all of our assets right here. Let's go ahead and get rid of layer 2. And some things to note from here. In this case, it's already all set out, but you want to make sure that all of your vector paths, all of your content is actually within the artboard that you're using as your base. Clipping masks don't exactly work. It'll still take that vector image from outside the clipping mask as its border, and it'll give you really weird scaling problems you aren't expecting. So if you are using clipping masks for stuff like this, make sure to use compound paths, or make sure to actually properly cut it in a destructive manner. To do that, if you're planning to do that kind of process, then make sure you save your backups and save your copies so you can always go back in and edit it later. But you want to make sure that your actual content doesn't break the artboard that you're planning to use. Otherwise, you'll just get weird scaling issues. But anyway, so we have our assets here. Let's just go ahead and select all the assets. We can go down to this window down here. We can see we have them all selected here. And let's go ahead and select the folder we're planning to export to. So in this case, my TouchDesigner file is in the recording folder. And I have an SVG folder that I'm planning to use as my assets folder. So let's go ahead and select that. It's just easier for TouchDesigner to look down than it is to look up. In the file directors, you can totally look whatever direction you want. You can totally give an absolute path if you want as well. I just like keeping things relative and keeping things looking down if possible, just for ease of use and ease of moving it around later. So we can go ahead and select that folder. Clicking the little gear icon here, we can go ahead and select our SVG export information. So in this case, you want images to be set to embed. If you have it as preserve or link, then it'll be linked out, which is good for file size, but not good for how TouchDesigner would handle actually linking and finding it. It might work, but you might also just have issues that are annoying to resolve. So just keeping it to embed is good for this kind of project. I'm keeping my object IDs as layer names because if I come back and edit files, layer names will help me overwrite that file as opposed to unique IDs, which will just preserve the original assets. And in this case, that's not what I want. So let's go ahead and save those settings, and we should be good to export. So we can go ahead and export here. We can go ahead and see that it auto-opened the folder, and we see all of the assets are here. One thing to note is that, as we can see here, our assets are still in this asset exporter menu. So let's say we're in the asset exporter tab here, and I want to edit one of my logos. As you can see here, it still shows edited here. So I can always go here, export, and that change will affect that file. So it's a good way for me to edit the file, re-export, and not have to worry about like resyncing or anything like that. It'll all work automatically as long as these are all named the same. So let's go ahead and undo that and go back into TouchDesigner. So as you can see, it's already populated everything in TouchDesigner here, which is really cool. That's kind of the power of the Replicator comp, is that it's just taking all the names of our assets here, or taking all of the rows of our folder that we set as the template, and creating a whole new asset in the actual canvas itself to work with. And from that line of code, it's already connected into the layout, and everything's already connected. But as you can see, there's a bit of a problem. It's all tied to the TikTok logo, which we aren't exactly wanting. We're wanting it to go into all of them. So let's go into our template here. And what we want is, currently it's set to 1, so it's always going to look for the first one. But now that it's being replicated, we can do me.parent.digits. I believe that's correct. Oh, if I do that, no? What am I missing? .parent.digits? Oh, I just need to recreate the operators. Good thing of noting, if you're editing the actual main template, if you're editing the code, you'll have to manually recreate operators. However, if any of the contents in the template table change, then it will auto adjust. So good to keep a note so you aren't confused like I just was. And now we have everything already loaded. Some fun things to work with if you ever, if it ever has issues, you can always manually move where things are located. You can set it to be horizontal or in a grid format. In this case, I like it vertical, keeping things out of the way. And now we can work on doing fun things with all of this vector information we just put in. So from here, let's go ahead and create a constant. And we're just going to connect our item 1 to that. We can set the alpha to 0. We can set the output to set resolution only. From here in our layout, let's go ahead and set this to scale resolution. So we know the resolution is incredibly long and narrow for it to be a good ribbon here. Then from here, we can go in and set this to a null, and then set this to another layout sorry. So we have our 2 layouts here. Let's set the resolution again to that. And then from here, let's go ahead and make a comp. And we'll connect our layout 2 to it. Let's go ahead and change our order and change our operation to over. And then let's change this to native resolution. Then finally here, we can set our horizontal justification to left. So that way, whenever we're set to 0 on translate, we're looking at this first logo here. So next up, let's go ahead and create an LFO chop. And then from here, what we want is a ramp. We want the frequency to be like 0.15 for now. And the amplitude, we want to actually be a little bit clever. So negative op folder 1 dot num rows -1. Oh, and we actually correctly do it. And now we should have a nice ramp going up. So let's go ahead and connect this to our translate. And now you can see we basically created ourselves a nice little ribbon scroll bar going through. And that's a pretty good place there. So next up, let's go ahead and connect this to a null now that we're kind of at the end of our operation here. And then from here, this is already pretty nice. It's a nice little scroll bar going through. Tons of reasons you might want this in any of one of your projects. In this case, though, we're going to do a little bit more and going to go ahead and create that interesting 3D tiling effect that we saw earlier. So we're just going to do that with a lot of instancing. Basically, we're going to take our grid, take our color information, and do interesting things with that to create it to be 3D. So to get started, let's go ahead and get a grid stop, and let's go ahead and set that to be based off of our resolution. So rows and columns to be 100, or to be our resolution, and we can set our size to match that as well. From there, all we really need to do is just do a SOP2 to get our information into numeric data. And then from there, let's go ahead and get a rectangle SOP. And we're going to change the scaling of this just a little. Let's go like 0.9 to give us some more separation and everything. So from there, what we need to do is get all of our pixel information. So to do that, we can do a top 2. In this case, we're just going to go one channel at a time. And I'm actually going to add another channel called TZ in this case. So notice that it's only giving us 100. That is because we want to make sure that we set it to full image. And then we want to output as a single channel to auto shuffle it for us. So now everything's in the right channel. Now let's go ahead and copy that over a few times. One for every other channel we're doing. So red to R. Red to R. Green to G. Blue to B, and then alpha to A. Awesome. And then because I know this is going to be handling our depth for specifically this top one here, I'm just going to add a math top here. And we're just going to multiply it by 5 or so for now. And then from there, we're just going to add a null to kind of cap us off. And we're going to do that everywhere else here as well, just in case we want to come back here later. So we have everything connected here. And from here, let's go ahead and merge all of this together. So it's all one nice chop to work with. So we can just do a merge chop, highlight all these, and we can just connect them all at once. And then from here, let's go ahead and start the actual instancing. So from here, we can go ahead and select our geo. When you right click and connect it in, it will do it nicely. If you ever go in, you can see that it's just replacing it for an in top here, and geo instancing whatever is in the base itself. So from here, we want to turn on instancing, and we're going to use this as our default op. So X will be TX, Y will be TY, and Z will be TZ1. As you can see, we're already getting some interesting effects going on now. And then from here, our color, R will be R, G will be G, and then continue matching up from that color information we had before. Awesome. So from here, let's go ahead and set up our lights and camera. So we can go ahead and set up our light, and we can go ahead and set up our camera here, knowing that it's going to work out later. From here, we can just go ahead and set a null that's just basically set to 0, 0. And we can have our camera set to always look at that null. So that way, when we move our camera now to get a better view, it's always going to be looking at that center. So in this case, it's actually looking at the rear side of it if we look at our geo and our camera. So let's fix that really quick. Moving it to a positive value. I'm kind of liking that a bit. Let's give it some more, just kind of moving it around until we get something that we like. Never be afraid to just kind of reset it if things get too wonky. And that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and set our light to be a distant light. And then from there, let's go ahead and get our render top. Not our render select, our render top. And that's looking pretty good. Let's just go ahead and set that to a null and set that as our background. So that's pretty good. It's definitely a little bit fast. We can turn that down a bit here in our LFO. So let's go to like 0.12. Let's go to like 0.1. Honestly, still a little bit fast. 0.05. Okay, that's pretty good. So that's pretty nice for a scroll. For kind of a like tiling scroll effect here. Although I think we can be a bit more interesting with it. So first off, let's kind of just save some computing resources here, and let's go ahead and bring our resolution down from 100 to 50. And we can adjust our camera as well to match that. It's getting a bit lower in the resolution, but a bit easier on the computer, and like I kind of like the more pixely effect that we have going here. Move the camera to kind of match what I like here. And this is good as a scroll effect, but something that I think might be a bit more interesting would be if we added a filter to kind of give it a more transition and graceful effect. So our filter, what we want to do is filter per sample, and let's set it to like half a second. So as you can see here, now we're actually kind of getting an interesting, almost like wave pattern going on. And let's go ahead and add that to everything else so we don't get anything ever out of sync. So we can just kind of copy it all in and just move all of our other nodes to match it. And because we have our nulls, we don't have to worry about reconnecting it to the merges. We just have to connect it to the nulls. Okay, and that's some more interesting effects. I think we can make this a bit more extreme, multiply it by 7 maybe. And I'm kind of liking the effects here. And yeah, I think this is really about it. So as you can see here, what we kind of were able to do, we were able to create a replicator top to be able to take in all the SVGs from this folder. We were able to play around with Illustrator. So that way, once you kind of get this asset creation workflow going, like we have here, no matter what effects you do, let's say you really want to do an interesting effect on the TikTok logo here. Once you export it, select your same folder, it'll ask you to replace. Sure, we can go ahead and replace. And we can see once we recreate our replicator, that our effect has changed here. So now we can kind of see that happening here. So as you can see, once this goes, you can really start getting some interesting effects and really get a nice workflow between different programs. If you have a designer or a visual designer working in Adobe products, this is a nice way to kind of give them a folder or give them something to work with that they're populating, knowing that it will auto go into the code and auto go into the touch patch that you have here. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good place to stop. Thanks for watching and have a good day.
Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you like our YouTube content, I highly recommend you check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. The HQ Pro is the only comprehensive educational resource and community for immersive design, TouchDesigner, and creative tech pros. In the HQ Pro trainings, we cover almost any topic you can think of, and we go way more in depth than we do in our YouTube tutorials. We have a private group where Matthew Reagan, myself, and our other industry veteran and pioneer teachers answer your questions every single day. If that sounds cool, click the link in the description to learn more. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more free TouchDesigner and immersive content.